Story number 1. I saw the devil today. When most people hear the word devil, they picture some red guy with horns and a tail. But in this case, it was a man in a completely human form. I'd convinced myself I didn't need new clothes, but I was really itching to get out of the house. I decided to hit up a thrift store near my place to kill some time before dinner. I tried on a few outfits, browsed the mannequins, and eavesdropped on some of the conversations happening around me. Honestly, the kind of drama that belongs on a reality TV show. As I was wrapping things up, I noticed my body felt off. I got goosebumps all over, from my head to my toes. I felt nauseous, but I tried to brush it off. My head was spinning, and I felt disoriented and lost. For a few seconds, I didn't even know where I was or why I was there. It freaked me out a little, but I didn't want to get worked up. Since I wasn't feeling great, I told myself it was time to head home. I left the store without buying anything, which is harder than it sounds for someone like me in a thrift store. I stepped out into the parking lot to find my car. I was about halfway there when a van pulled up beside me and stopped. It looked familiar, but I didn't pay much attention. Suddenly, the sky went dark, and everything around me became blurry. The van's engine cut out. A man, probably in his late 40s, got out of the van and started walking toward the back. I felt an overwhelming sense of dread and knew something was wrong, but I kept walking toward where I'd parked. That's when I heard a voice in my head. Not a human voice, not actual words, but a feeling. The feeling told me, run. I looked back at the man one more time. This time, we locked eyes. I have never in my life been so scared for my life. When our eyes met, his eyes were as black as a moonless night. His smile was the most evil I had ever seen, revealing yellow, rotting teeth. He started walking toward me, and I muttered some words I can't repeat, still unable to tear my gaze away from him. It felt like I was dreaming, like a nightmare I wanted to escape, but couldn't. The man was holding something in his hand as he continued to advance toward me. I broke eye contact, took what little breath I could, and bolted. With the keys in my hand, I jumped into the driver's seat, slammed the door shut, locked it, and sped home. When I saw I was a safe distance away, I pulled over. I was shaking uncontrollably, dizzy, unable to breathe, nauseous, terrified, and in shock. I couldn't process what had just happened. My mind wouldn't let me. As I started to catch my breath and try to calm myself, the sky began to lighten again. The world around me was no longer dark or blurry. It was finally coming back into focus. Then it hit me. I realized what I had seen, and it was something I never expected to see in my life. God had given me a glimpse of the devil, and believe me, it's not something you want or hope to see. When that evil feeling washed over me in the parking lot, I felt like I was in danger, like my life was at risk, like I was about to be captured or harmed. The man said not a word, made not a sound, though I eventually made it home physically safe, and though that drive felt like an eternity, my mind will never forget what I saw on October 15th. Story number 2. The Scarecrow on the Road, California, 1999. The year was 1999. I don't remember the month, but it was the beginning of the cold season with stormy weather. I was living with my parents in Tranquility, California at the time. I was out with friends in the town of San Joaquin, which was 8 miles from Tranquility. We were having a good time, and the party went on past midnight. I'd had too much to drink, and after someone broke up a fight, I decided it was time to head home. I'd gotten there with a friend in his car, but when I went to find him, I was told he'd already left with someone without telling anyone. I didn't want to stay, so I started to prepare to walk home along the highway that connected the two towns. Others tried to convince me to wait for my friend, but in my state, I'd made up my mind. It was cold and windy that night. Not the best decision to walk 8 miles alone, but I figured I'd hitchhike and hope someone would give me a ride. I just wanted to get home and sleep. I'd walked about a third of the way when I realized I'd made a mistake. I should have stayed and waited for that irresponsible friend of mine. Just then, I saw the headlights of a car coming from behind me, going in the same direction. I stuck out my thumb, but the car drove past. The second car did the same. It was getting colder, and lightning flashed. I was about to turn back when I saw a third car approaching. I put my thumb out, and the car drove past, but as it did, its brake lights flashed, and it stopped on the side of the road. I ran towards the car, relieved that I would finally get a ride and escape the cold. As I approached, the driver's side door opened and the driver stepped out. There was something completely wrong with the way he exited the vehicle. His body movements were stiff and strangely awkward. As I got closer, I was about to say something when suddenly a bright flash of lightning ripped across the sky, illuminating everything. I got a clear look at the driver. He looked like one of those mannequins from a department store, a blank expression with a slight smile. And the way he moved, I was absolutely horrified. Then the passenger door opened, and someone inside also stepped out in the same bizarre manner. Through the reflection against the headlights shining down the road, I saw it was a woman. Another lightning bolt flashed. She was a mannequin too. I think I screamed, and then I ran into the cornfield next to the highway. The corn was about 6 feet tall and had just been watered, so I was running in mud that was up to my ankles. I just kept running, not stopping. Running in the mud was exhausting, and after a few minutes, I had to stop for air. That's when I heard the corn stalks behind me being rustled. I started to feel woozy, dizzy, like I was going to pass out. Then I heard the car doors slam shut and the sound of the car driving away. I didn't go back to the highway. No way. I was too scared. I continued wading through the cornfield until I reached the other side. I almost collapsed then. I was shaking all over. I was there for at least an hour before I made my way back to San Joaquin. Even to this day, when I think back, maybe it was just someone playing a prank to scare someone. I don't know. To me, they looked completely real, and it truly felt like a nightmare. Story number 3, The Pig Lady, Michigan. 2005, I'm still not sure if what I'm about to tell really happened. It could have just been a terrible nightmare. At least that's what I've been telling myself for years. Has anyone ever heard of the Pig Lady? When I first heard about her, I was about 12 years old, back in 2005. I was staying over at a friend's house, and we were up all night telling each other ghost stories. Then one of the girls told us about the Pig Lady, a person who had the body of a woman but the face of a pig. You had to say her name 3 times, and she would appear and chase you. I didn't believe it one bit. Then she said it had happened to her and her old friends, telling us about how the Pig Lady had chased them through the woods. I didn't believe a word of it, but I played along. After a while, she decided to call her name 3 times. Pig Lady, Pig Lady, Pig Lady. Nothing happened? I concluded it was just some old urban legend. After we finished telling stories, we went to bed. It was thundering and lightning outside. And since the bed was right under a window without curtains, everyone made me sleep on the side by the window. The other 2 friends fell asleep before me. I lay there listening to the rain. Then suddenly there was a flash of lightning, and I thought I saw someone standing at the window. But when I blinked, they were gone. I kept telling myself I was imagining things and that everything would be fine in the morning. The next morning, the 2 friends wanted to walk to the store. We started talking about the Pig Lady again, and one of them called her name 3 times, and we all yelled at her. Right at that moment, we heard footsteps behind us. There was nothing on that road but trees. My friend's house was the only house, and the nearest neighbor was near the store, almost a mile away. All of us were too scared to look back, but every time we stopped, the footsteps stopped too. Did you guys hear that? One of them asked. Hear what? I asked back in denial. Before anyone could answer, I decided to turn my head back for a second to see what was going on, and I wish I hadn't. The sight was the worst thing I had ever seen in my life. It was a woman wearing a blue jumpsuit and a baseball cap. The second I looked back, she lifted her head, and I saw the face of a pig. I took off running and screaming without looking back. I knew my friends were somewhere behind me because I heard their screams blend with my own. When we reached the store 10 minutes later, I looked back. There was nothing. I didn't stop running until I got inside the store. And there was no sign of anyone but me and my friends. We looked at each other, breathless, not knowing if what had just happened was real. We called my friend's mom to pick us up, telling her we saw a strange man lurking around. To this day, we still swear it never happened, that it was just our imagination. But how could all of us have imagined the same thing? And how could that person have disappeared like that? These are questions we've avoided for years and will continue to avoid. Story number 4, The 2 Walkers Who Vanished, South Dakota. In the early 1970s, my older cousin and his family lived in the Bull Creek area, which was 6 miles south and 2 miles east of St. Francis, South Dakota. He and some relatives were having a drinking party one Friday night. When they were running out of beer, he and his son were sent to get more in the town of Kilgore, Nebraska, about 10 miles south. When they reached the main road and turned south, after about 2 miles, he saw a man and a woman walking. Without much thought, he stopped his vehicle, stuck his head out, and said in Lakota, "Get in, we'll take you there." But to his surprise, there was no one there. They had completely vanished. He got goosebumps all over, but put the car in gear and continued on. For the next couple of miles, those same 2 walkers reappeared on the road, walking south. He stopped again to offer them a ride, and once again, they disappeared. He drove straight to Kilgore, bought the beer, opened a can and poured all the contents onto the ground, and then drove back. There were no further incidents on the way back. When he arrived at the party and told his story, the mood became almost completely still as everyone looked at each other in horror. One person was sober enough to light a stick of incense, even though they were drinking. After that, everyone went home. From then on, a few other people also reported seeing those 2 walkers and offering them rides, only for them to disappear as well. According to the rumors, no one was supposed to be on that road after dark, drunk or sober, because of the walkers. This story was retold to me in 1997 by my cousin's wife. Despite the horror, it didn't decrease the amount of traffic going to Kilgore for alcohol. Story number 5. The Haunted House in British Columbia, Canada, 1991. This event happened in July of 1991 in the Fraser Valley, British Columbia, Canada. My husband and I bought a small house in a rural area, a quiet, peaceful place with dairy farms and rolling hills. We had lived there for a few weeks when one night we were woken up by the sounds of 2 women having a very heated argument. We both got up, checked the entire house, and went outside. But everything was quiet. The strange thing was, the neighbor's dog, who normally would have barked if anyone was around, didn't make a sound, and the motion sensor lights would have turned on, but nothing happened. The next day, I asked the neighbors, and they said they hadn't heard anything. Things were quiet for a few days. Then one morning around 7 a.m., I woke up to the smell of coffee and fresh bread. I went into the kitchen. Nothing. This happened almost every morning. My grandchildren would come over to visit and often played in the yard. When they went home, we would often hear the sound of a small child crying. We looked around, but there was no one there. This happened almost every time the grandchildren went home, as if there was a ghost child who missed them. One time, I even heard a little girl's voice say, "Grandma, I read books about ghosts and was advised not to be afraid, but to talk to them." So I did. I told the child to go ahead and call her grandma to help her. Not long after, the crying stopped. I thought her grandma had come to get her. It was a little sad, but I hoped I had done the right thing. When the roof was being repaired, the worker said there had been a fire. There were burn marks in the kitchen area. We thought that was the cause. Later, we sold the house, and the new owners completely tore down the old house and built a new one. So I was never able to find out the history of that house. Story number 6. The voice calling John. I moved into the house in January 1991. The first night I was awakened by a deep, shaky voice calling the name, John. I sat up and looked around the room, then went to the window to see if anyone was outside. It was a cold winter night, and there was no one around. I got back into bed and heard the same voice call John again. I sat up and told the voice to go away, and that this was my house. The voice stopped. A few months later, after getting acquainted with my neighbor, I asked her about the people who had lived in my house. She said a family had lived there for about 20 years, and they had a son named John. She also said the woman of the house had passed away, and the house was sold. John was now in his late 50s and was an alcoholic. My 8-year-old granddaughter, Jenny, also lived with me. She would come into my room at night and say that she would wake up and know a ghost was standing next to her bed. Things would also go missing and then reappear. This went on for about a year. Then one morning, as I was getting ready for work, I heard Jenny upstairs. She was lying on my bed because the ghost had woken her up the night before. I ran upstairs and found the child trembling. She said she had seen the ghost standing next to her, and described it as a small woman with dark hair. She said the ghost touched her foot and her entire body went numb. Years later, my son and his 2-year-old granddaughter came to stay with me. My son started losing things, like scissors, and then they would mysteriously reappear. Then he started waking up at night with the feeling of the ghost standing and looking at him. She's back. I feel her presence many nights when I sit alone in the living room. I think we've learned to live with each other. Story number 7. Mysterious weeping, British Columbia, 1981 and 1997. These experiences happened to me twice, years apart. The first time around 1981 when I was 16, I was at home in Burnaby, British Columbia. I was alone on the back deck reading. Slowly, I began to notice a strange sound approaching, like an animal cry, but with something very human about it, like a child sobbing. I put my book down and looked into the yard, but saw nothing, even though the sound seemed only a few steps away. I started to get a little scared, so I took my dog out into the yard to investigate. By the time we reached the front yard, the sound stopped. I searched everywhere but found nothing. At least I didn't. But my dog clearly saw something in the flower bed by the house. He was barking and growling with his hackles raised, but there was nothing there. That evening, while I was watching TV with my mom and sister, we heard a strange noise from the window, like someone dragging their wet hands slowly across the glass, making a screeching sound. It terrified us. My dad finally went to check, but there was nothing. The noise was attributed to kids playing pranks, even though it had never happened before. The second time, in 1997, I was living in Surrey, British Columbia, with my husband and our 10-month-old son. I went into the kitchen to do some work when I started to hear the strange crying. Thinking it was my son, I went to check. My son wasn't crying at all. The sound got louder as I stood at the top of the stairs. It moved from downstairs, up the stairs, past me, through the kitchen, and to the back door, then stopped. Strangely, my cat was then too afraid to go through that kitchen door for a few days, even though she always had before. It's worth noting a coincidence. My grandparents had a similar experience around 1932 in their farmhouse near Winnipeg, Manitoba. They were sitting at the kitchen table when a crying sound began to move around the table. They followed the sound out to the barn, where it stopped. There was no explanation. I wonder if all these events are connected. Perhaps my family is being haunted by a weeping spirit. Story number 8. Baby Crees, Northern Michigan. When I was 14, my best friend Missy was 17. We lived in a very small town in northern Michigan. I often stayed at her house on weekends. We'd play cards, watch TV, or take walks around the small lake that was the center of town. I often heard Missy telling her parents and friends, "I heard a baby crying again last night." She described the crying as being heard outside her bedroom in the hallway, always at night. Her bedroom was the only room on the second floor. I heard this story many times and didn't doubt it, but I often dismissed it. Until one night, I heard it myself. I was lying on the pile of pillows at the foot of her bed. We had just turned off the lights and wished each other good night. About a minute later, I started to hear a baby crying. "Missy, I hear it," she replied. "Don't worry, it'll stop on its own." So I didn't worry. I just lay there listening. From the cry of one baby, the crying grew to maybe 3, then back down to 1, then more again. This went on for about 5 minutes, quite a long time. I started to get annoyed and thought, when is this going to stop? Finally, the crying stopped. I said, "I don't hear it anymore." Then we went to sleep. From then on, I believed in ghosts. Not just because I heard it myself, but because both of us heard it at the same time. We never found out the origin of those babies or what their history was. It's strange. Story number 9. The house over the workshop. A teenager's story. My house isn't very old, but many strange things have happened there. I've always loved ghost stories, so perhaps I've been calling them. The first time happened when I was about 6 years old. I'm 14 now. I put my stuffed animal down on its side, turned away, and looked back. It was standing on all fours. It was a Webkinz stuffed dog. I didn't think much of it then. The next incident happened last year. My room is directly above the workshop the previous owner built in the basement. When I'm sitting in my room, through the vents, I can hear voices coming from the basement, even though no one is down there or any TV or radio is on. Usually it's a man and a woman talking. The man sounds angry, cussing and yelling, while the woman is crying and he's throwing things. This year, things have gotten worse. Recently, I saw a woman in a long white dress walk through the living room in the morning. One time, while I was in the shower, I heard someone walking around the house and a woman's laughter, even though I was home alone. It also only happens in my room. One morning, just after I woke up from a dream about demon-like creatures attacking me, I felt a cold rush run down my spine and started to shiver uncontrollably. I couldn't move or scream and was too afraid to open my eyes. Then I heard a whisper in my ear. Thank you for the things you will remember in your mind. Most recently, a few weeks ago, I was lying in bed and looking up at the wall. I saw the shadow of a person sitting there. It looked like they were wearing a robe. I thought it was just the shadow of something in the room, so I got up and moved everything around, but the shadow didn't change. That night, while the shadow was still there, I stepped into its position and felt a crazy cold. And since then, that shadow appears every evening. Story number 10, Texas UFO Lights, July 2011. This event happened on July 21st, 2011. I'm a contractor and had spent the whole day in Alice, Texas, looking at potential jobs. By 6 p.m., I started driving back to Beeville. But before I got onto the main highway, I stopped at a restaurant for dinner and a couple of beers. It was close to 8 p.m. before I hit the road. It was getting dark. While driving, I was mentally calculating the number of jobs in my head. One was very promising. I called my partner to talk about work and hung up. About halfway back to Beeville, I noticed on the left side of the road ahead, there were moving white lights. That area is pitch black at night, and those lights were the only thing visible. As I got closer, the colors started to change, from white to green, then blue, then red. When I was level with them, I slowed down to get a better look, then stopped. I thought it might be some vehicles. The lights lit up, moved up and down, then spun in circles. I estimated they were about a quarter of a mile away, but it's hard to judge in the dark. I started thinking about UFO and alien stories I'd read and began to conclude that I might be having my own encounter. I turned off the engine, left the headlights on, and rolled down the window to see if I could hear anything. There was nothing. It was a little eerie. The lights were moving in a zigzag pattern, up and down. Then suddenly they bunched together into a single cluster and stood still, as if they were aware of my presence. Slowly, they began to glow brighter, and I realized they were coming towards me. I decided enough was enough and started the car, but as soon as I did, the engine died. I tried again, but the engine sputtered sluggishly. I turned off the lights, thinking it might help. Meanwhile, the lights turned a coppery yellow and got brighter and brighter. On the third try, the engine started. Then the incredibly strange thing happened. When I turned the headlights back on, the beam started to bend towards the approaching lights. I'm not kidding. I've never seen anything like it in my life. Could that even happen? I put the car in gear and took off. The beam straightened out as I accelerated. I kept checking my rearview mirror, and as those lights came in line with the highway, I saw they were getting brighter, meaning they were chasing me. I was genuinely scared. My speed reached 130 kilometers per hour, and I was sweating profusely. Looking in the mirror, there was only one light at a time, but that was an illusion because they were flying in a vertical line. They flew over my car one by one, shining their coppery yellow light inside the car. The lights continued to go ahead of me down the highway, reflecting their brightness onto the road. I slowed down and let them pass. As I did, those lights veered left in that vertical line and headed east. Once again, my headlights began to bend towards them. They continued to travel east until they disappeared behind the hills. I didn't see those yellow lights for the rest of the drive. I was so panicked and incredibly relieved when I finally got home.